somewhere. Breathe in some love. Let yourself unfold. Breathe in some love.
Black man, unless and until you get the patriarchy off your back and out your throat, those podcast mics gonna keep you alone and lonely. I'm Dr. Nikki, and this is Dr. Nikki Knows. Today, we are getting all into the patriarchy and all the things that it is and is not. And I sure hope this mic is working today because I got things to say. If you are here with me, can you let me know if the mic is working? I'm so paranoid from last time. And this little thing doesn't move to let me know if the mic is working. I would certainly appreciate it if you would let me know if it's actually recording. Hi, I'm Dr. Nikki. I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm a pleasure coach. Yay, thank you. I had to make sure because last time, now I'm super paranoid and I had things to say that I wanted to make sure it was crystal clear on the mic. I hope it's doing the background noise cancellation because there was a loud revving of engine that just happened over here. Welcome to Dr. Nikki Knows. Today we are talking all about the patriarchy. And specific, June is Men's Mental Health Month. Did you know that? June is all the things. June is Juneteenth, it's Father's Day, it's Pride, it's Men's Mental Health Month, it's Black Music Month. I think I'm even probably forgetting one. And so just a little bit of housekeeping. I am not going to be here next week. I am traveling home to Louisiana to do some final care for my mother's estate. If you don't know, my mother passed away last year and I'm an only child. I am the executor of her estate. She owned her home outright, which I am proud to always say and grateful for. And I'm going to return home next week to take care of that. And so I am taking care of myself by taking the time out from work of all kind, including being here with you. But I'll be back in July. Okay. So don't get too used to me not being here weekly. And since this is my last episode for the month of June, I had to talk about it. Okay. As a reminder, I am a licensed psychologist. I am a therapist and pleasure coach. I'm not your licensed psychologist. So whatever you hear here, if it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, leave the rest. If you get a little bit activated and you think maybe you want to work with me, you'll always find the links for scheduling a consultation with me in the show notes. Okay. So are we ready to get into it? If you are, let me hear you say yes, or you could put in the comments, yes, let's get into it. Let me know if you're ready. Because today we're talking about Black love, which I am a huge fan of, that Black on Black. I love it. Okay. And patriarchy and intimacy, and how, even though it is something that we all desire, intimacy, that is connection, right? That we all desire, how, as long as we are letting the patriarchy be a third bedmate for us, Black men and women, we're not going to be able to have the promised land that we could be deserved. And I really wanted to get into it because that's that B on B. If anybody is on social media, and I'm assuming if you're watching me here on YouTube, you divulge, that's not the word, indulge, my goodness, you indulge a little dibble dabble into social media, and you are fully aware that somebody gave all the Black men who have patriarchal views on relationships and love and masculinity and femininity podcast mics a couple of years ago, and things have just deteriorated since. And if you were to only look at the sort of discourse that happens about Black women, Black relationships through that lens, you would probably think that things are absolutely broken. You would think that Black men and Black women really must not like each other. Um, if you're a woman out in these dating app streets and you are a cisgender woman who dates cisgender Black men, you may have some questions yourself about what what is happening. Do y'all even like us? And the reason why I think we are experiencing all of that and why the question even exists is because of patriarchy. I don't think it really has much to do with gender as a concept, but much more so about how the patriarchy influences our gender roles, our expectations for each other as gendered beings, how we judge ourselves about how we adhere to our gender roles, and then the inherent adversarial nature that comes along with the patriarchal view of gender. Okay, you with me so far? We got nothing against gender identity of all shades and variations. Go, do you. But when you allow the patriarchy to then influence rigid roles around what is and what isn't masculinity and what is and what isn't femininity, oftentimes, or more often than not, I should say, a whole bunch of other bullshit gets clogged in the system. And I really want to unpack that, specifically with regard to these concepts around high value men and high value women, around women being submissive, around body counts, right? The whole manosphere, red pill universe, at how easily it seems that there are Black men who can open up their mouths to critique, denigrate, and tear down Black women, but are unwilling to hold themselves accountable or look at their own behaviors in looking at some of the less healthy, dysfunctional patterns that exist or dynamics that exist between Black men and women. And what I want to argue is it's not necessarily that the genders themselves are broken, but how we think about power and gender that gets in the way. It's a theme here. Anytime you start talking about a system of which patriarchy is, you talk about white supremacy, of which it is a system. You talk about capitalism. You talk about you pick any system. And what it does is serve to uphold power dynamics. And in the process of upholding power dynamics, the first victims are always our humanity. And I think that especially in the current time, well, I'm not going to say especially. We got a lot of irons in the fire these days. Everything is real critical. But I think about the experience of Black community a lot. And I think about how our access to community, to collective care and well-being was different during the Reconstruction era, during Jim Crow, during the Civil Rights era, during the Black Power era, than it currently exists now. And one of the things I think that is primarily different is our one is that we don't live in physical geographic proximity to one another in the same way that we did, I think, in those previous experiences. And because of the advent of the digital age and technology, in lots of ways, I think that we actually are more emotionally disconnected, even though we have greater access to each other than ever before. And I want to sort of lean in a little bit more and look at this emotional connection, this sense of collective well-being, this sense of community and intimacy as we go forward in this conversation. Let me know if you're tracking. Are you connecting the dots? These are things that I think about a lot that seem very obvious to me. And sometimes I'm not sure if I'm making the argument as clearly as it feels like it exists up here for me. So I'm going to take a sip of water and let me know if that's sinking in for you. Oh, thank you for that. Okay. So when I talk about the patriarchy, what I'm really talking about it as a system of power in which masculinity and things associated with masculinity are given greater power, privilege, access, rank, respect, consideration than things associated with femininity or things defined as feminine. So there's an inherent power dynamic. Now, what gets us caught up and confused in this good day and age is one, I personally don't think, and based on my understanding about Afrocentric cultures, I don't think Black people was ever set up to live in a patriarchal sort of framework, right? I'm being very generalist in what I'm saying, right? But I think from a Pan-Africanist worldview, I don't think it was nascently in us to have these sort of power dynamics with regard to gender. But there's always that good old friend of the transatlantic slave trade and white supremacy and capitalism to come in and just do its razzle dazzle to fuck everything up. And so we live in a time now in which masculinity has been so associated with dominance, with aggression, with violence, with anger, and proprietary thinking, this possessive ownership, right? All of those things, if you really sit and think about it, are not things that are inherently masculine. They are things that really are inherently white supremacist. But if you adhere to a perspective of masculinity that is in alignment with those things, and if you are a cis man and you identify as masculine, then part of what happens with patriarchy is that it requires you to have like a strong allegiance to it, right? To live out and have behaviors, have worldviews, have beliefs that demonstrate your masculinity. Because the worst thing you could do is be a feminine man. And so I think what has happened is like a copy of a copy of a copy, right? And trying to dissociate from or distance their selves from being perceived as feminine or less masculine, which is like the worst thing ever. I think that a lot of Black men have really put a lot of investment in more toxic expression of masculinity. And one of the ways in which that functions is emotionally disconnected. Plain and simple, right? If you think about the verbs, I would love our adjectives, Lord. Adjectives are verbs. When you think about masculinity, when you think about what is a man, I wonder what comes to mind for you. Is it softness? Is it open heart? Is it gentle? Is it compassionate? Are those the things that come to your mind foremost? Or are things like a provider, things like a protector, things like strong, things like hard, even cool under pressure, emotionally calm or cool, right? If those are the things that come to mind, then that doesn't leave a lot of room for the types of intimacy that we say that we want and that we most need and desire in our heterosexual relationships. And so in some ways, I think Black men, cis Black men sort of get put in this catch-22 in that they are expected to show up with masculinity and demonstrate all of these so-called masculine behaviors, thoughts, worldviews, but it is those very same things that keep them from the prize, and that is being able to have a long-term, intimate, loving, connected relationship with a cis Black woman. And so I want to sort of look at that and talk about that with a little bit more depth today. When I was first on TikTok, I think this was in the first, maybe second year of the pandemic. I made a TikTok on like a Friday afternoon. It was at the end of the week, and I had seen a number of couples that week, and I made just a very honest and vulnerable TikTok about how I see so many of my Black women clients that are in marriages or relationships with Black men do so much emotional labor and and make so much room for the lack of emotional intelligence and maturity in their partners that it is exhausting. That a lot of the work that I can end up doing in couples therapy is not taking sides. That's never my job as a couples therapist. And if you have a couples therapist that's telling you that you're wrong and somebody else is right, you probably want a new therapist. But that's a different episode. But wanting to find ways to make space for the husband or male partner to be able to express themselves, to be able to talk openly about their experience, but recognizing that they had very little skill, language, capacity for doing that, and seeing the Black women or white clients really taking up more responsibility in that area. That was my real observation. That continues to be my real observation when I work with Black heterosexual couples. I made the TikTok. Somebody else found it. They reposted it on Twitter. And it went viral. And it was the first time I'd ever gone viral like that. And quite frankly, the last. I've had a couple other posts that have done well, but nothing to that level of exposure. And quite frankly, it was overwhelming. But I share that to say there were so many women that resonated with my perspective and what I said in the post, and so many men that were immediately offended and defensive and worked quickly to denigrate me. And once I got out of my feelings about it, for me, it was very obvious that the same sort of dynamics, the same sort of pattern of dynamics that are happening in their relationship was happening in response to my post about the relationships, right? And we continue to see this over and over again. And one of the big questions I want us all to sit with is, if we don't disrupt this pattern, where is the eventual end? Right? Said differently, if we as heterosexual Black folks don't find better ways to be in loving, intimate, connected, caring relationship with one another, if we don't find healthy ways to do that, where does that leave us as a collective? If we don't learn to resolve our own definitions and identities around gender outside of a systemic power framework, how is it that we make space for our gender nonconforming nibblings? How is it that we create a liberatory future that is truly inclusive of all of us? How is it that we create space, loving space, celebration, and appreciation for our queer kinfolk, right? I don't know a way that we can. One of my favorite authors of all time is Octavia Butler. And I hear people talk a lot about Octavia's works with Parable the Sword, Parable the Talents. Yes, absolutely. 10s, 10s, 10s across the board. Kendrick, 10, 10, 10s. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the Imago trilogy. She has 3 books that are set in a futuristic, post-apocalyptic universe in which humans are repopulated in an alien world, in an alien community. And that's one of the first book is called Dawn. I'll link it in the show notes. If you are a sci-fi junkie like me, if you are even interested in getting deeper into Octavia's catalog, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't read the whole trilogy, the first book is phenomenal. You can actually listen to it on Spotify if you have Spotify Premium. You can get it from your library if audiobooks are your thing. But the book is called Dawn. And here's what happens and why this has always resonated with me. I read this book probably 30 years ago now. And the metaphor still remains true. What happens is they choose a Black woman. Her name is Lilith Iapo, and she is the first woman that the aliens wake up. Where the book starts. And she has been selected to help sort of pull a group of humans to repopulate, right? To begin to recreate humanity. But the catch is they have to recreate with this alien species. The alien species is called Oankali. And the way that the alien species work is they always reproduce through 3 people. Very different than how we do it here on Earth among us humans, right? You got a sperm, you got an egg, you got a penis, you got a vagine together, right? Some kind of way it gets all scrambled up, baby. But in that universe that she created, the Oankali required three folks. And so what begins to happen is as the humans are repopulating the earth through this three entity person. Do you call an alien a person? So you see how the ADHD mind works? Through the three individual connection. What happens is the human beings begin to develop a literal revulsion for touching each other without that third party involved. And for me, that has always been this really vibrant metaphor for the disconnects that we see in Black heterosexual relationships. For me, the third party is patriarchy. That we are so invested in living our lives through the power structures that we have inherited from white folks that we don't know how to be in loving, connected relationship without it. And it is that very thing that causes us to be as disconnected and disjointed as we are. I would love to hear your thoughts about that. If you agree, if that makes sense, if that's how you think about the metaphor. And as a psychologist, therapist, the only way that I know around is through. And what I think has to happen is I think there's a lot of room for growth and healing around cisgendered Black men connecting with their emotional selves. I think that I know for a fact that boys and men are really lauded and rewarded for being emotionally disconnected. They are rewarded for thinking, quote unquote, logically, for relying on their intellect, for allowing their emotional repertoire to be limited to a small range of negative emotions, typically around anger. But that the human experience is a much wider, much more nuanced, much more variant array of emotions, and that men are human beings just as much as women are. And that I think that there is a lot of stuckness that happens, a lot of anger that is built up because there hasn't been safe space, there hasn't been intentional training, skill development, socialization, support around developing language and skills to not only be attuned to your emotions as a cis Black man, but to then be able to give voice to them and then to be able to hold space for someone else's emotions in relationship to yours that is not adversarial, that is not competitive, that is not a power dynamic. Those are three distinct things. Attunement to your own emotions, the ability to name and express emotions, and the ability to be able to hold space for other folks' emotions. More importantly, those are the three foundational things required to have intimacy. I'm not talking about physical intimacy. I'm not talking about sex, and I do love to talk about that. You can have physical intimacy and be emotionally disconnected. However, if we're talking about long-term sustainable relationships, especially romantic relationships, what you need is all the pieces coming together. You need emotional intimacy. You need spiritual intimacy. You need physical intimacy. You need financial intimacy. Dr. Shamira Howard has seven types of intimacy. And the way this brain works, I'm never going to remember all seven at once. Again, I will put them in the show notes. What I do know is regardless of the type of intimacy that you are seeking, intimacy always requires vulnerability. You are not experiencing intimacy without vulnerability ever. And if you do not have the capacity to be emotionally attuned first, then you cannot be vulnerable second. And so I think we have to take it all the way back to basics. I want to tell you, Black men, if you are listening, if someone shares this with you, if you happen to come across this, you cannot outthink your way beyond the patriarchy. You cannot outlogic your way beyond intimacy. You can't talk your way into your feelings. They are distinct things. We as human beings operate in three primary realms. We have behavior, the things that we do that are observable, that other people see. We have our thoughts and cognitions, the ideas, the beliefs, the words and logical frameworks that we use, and we have our emotions, how we feel, how we respond to things physiologically, and then we have a narrative to respond to those, um, uh, which are called feelings. We need all three. We come equipped with all three for a reason. And so what I am seeing when I see a lot of the harmful things that are said, a lot of the anger directed towards Black women, a lot of just really mean-spirited, denigrating, um, problematic as fuck things that I hear Black men say about Black women, the shit that I have experienced as a Black woman in relationship to Black men. What I come back to is a huge disconnect around emotions. And I see it repeated in ways over and over and over again. And there is no other way, my brother, but through. However, even moving through requires you to be vulnerable. Even moving through requires a level of emotional attunement and humility to be able to say, these are the areas in which I need help. And again, I am speaking in broad strokes. Obviously, I am not saying all Black cis men. And obviously, I'm not saying all Black cis women. I am a psychologist, I'm a therapist. I see people at their most wounded, and I've heard stories about people's worst experiences at the expense of other human beings. I am not naive. I'm not overgeneralizing. I'm speaking with these categorical terms for brevity and clarity. So don't be trying to repurpose my shit saying that I'm out here hating on Black men. That's not what this is. I'm actually very intentionally and lovingly trying to call Black men into a real conversation. That actually your biggest strength is in leaning into the thing that the white man has told you is your biggest weakness. That men that are emotionally available, that are emotionally intelligent, and that are emotionally mature are able to show up in vulnerability and authenticity and genuine connection. And women partners resonate with that. We know what that feels like. When someone is genuinely interested in who we are as human beings and not in the object of us being a placeholder woman who fits the criteria, when you are genuinely connected to us, when our well-being is of significance to you, we know that energetically. We can feel the difference. And so when you're getting reactions and responses to you that is defensive or dismissive or insulted, or women are responding to you as if they don't feel safe around you, rather than responding with defensiveness or retaliation, ask yourself why that is. Just why that might be. What might be the benefit of women, multiple women, a pattern of women responding to you in a negative way over time for shits and giggles? Like, what's the benefit to them? And if it can give them no benefit, what might be some other reasons? Could you potentially be creating or contributing to a dynamic that is causing that same reaction? Just sit with the question and see what comes up. Just sit with the question. I find that there's so much investment in the presentation of masculinity as posturing and reactivity and responsiveness, that the ability to be quiet, to slow down and be still, to go internally, I think, quite frankly, is sometimes terrifying because it's uncharted territory. because it's the skills that you don't feel like you have. And part of that identity with masculinity is being skilled and prepared and ready to go. And so even the concept of slowing down enough to ask yourself a question or not having the answers can sometimes even feel like an attack. And if that's true for you, sit with that. That's all. That is the process. These are all things that can be learned. They are skills that can be built, but you have to be willing to do so. And you have to be self-compassionate, but accountable at the same time. And to divest from a perspective that of like an adversarial nature. Like every Black woman in the world is not out to get you. Really, really, we're not. And we would appreciate it if you would stop seeing us as the enemy, because the patriarchy hurts everyone. You see how that works? We know how white supremacy hurts everyone. We know how late stage capitalism hurts everyone. The same thing here. The patriarchy hurts everyone. Okay? I work with a lot of Black women one-on-one in my therapy and coaching. My work is around relational and sexual wellness. I have a lot of women that are actively dating or in relationship or want to be in relationship, and their healing and growth can only go so far, because part of what has to happen is you being in a actual healthy dynamic for you to be able to grow in your own skills. And so I was telling a client just a couple of weeks ago that the work that she's doing on her own is great. It's wonderful. She's made a lot of strides, and some of these things can't fully blossom. She can't really fully evolve in the ways that she wants unless she is in a healthy relationship dynamic. And that is hard to do because it's slim pickings out here. It just is. And so that is one way in which it hurts all of us, right? The other piece is I'm focusing a lot on like Black heterosexual relationships, but the reality is emotional intelligence, emotional awareness, emotional maturity benefits the collective. It shows up in how we not only relate to our potential romantic partners or our romantic partners, but how we show up with each other across our same gender lines, how we show up with our parents and siblings and peers and children, right? Our ability to dream and live in a liberated future can only move as fast as our trauma recovery. Let me say that again. Our ability to live in a liberated future that includes collective well-being, that includes love, that includes safety, joy, pleasure, care, can only exist as fast as our trauma recovery. And being emotionally disconnected, emotionally numb, emotionally stunted, living only in the space of rage, entitlement, and anger is a trauma response. Full stop. That is not how healthy, fully evolved human beings are meant to be. We are meant to experience the range of emotions. The reason why there is an emotions wheel, a whole ass wheel of emotions, because we have positive, negative, and everything in between. And then we have intensities of all of those things. And so if you are connected to an identity that only allows you to experience the smallest sliver, you are only experiencing the smallest sliver of your humanity. Be angry about that, Black man. Be angry about that. Be angry about the fact that in order for your survival to have come about through the material means of upward mobility and success in a white supremacist, patriarchy, capitalist system, you've had to divest yourself from your humanity. Be angry about that. But don't be angry at us because we're asking you to show up in your humanity. Because we're asking you to have feelings. Because we know they're in there. Because we're asking you for your vulnerability. That's the reason why you're lonely. Not because Black women aren't submissive enough. That's the reason why you're lonely. Are you willing to have that conversation with yourself before you do it with anybody? Right? I hear a lot of talk and rhetoric around emotional regulation. You know, this whole thing around women being the emotional one, and that, you know, that's the same bullshit is why we've said we don't have a woman president here, right? Or like you don't know she's on her period, or even men asking women if she's on your period, right? That women are perceived as this like emotional volatility type of thing. I want to disabuse you of that. I want to reframe that for you and tell you that that is emotional suppression, not emotional regulation. I am a very emotional being. Hello, Sun in Cancer, Pisces rising. I'm as watery and feeling as they get. I am intuitive as they get. I make most of my life decisions based on my gut and intuition, how I feel about it, if it feels aligned for me. I'm also highly intelligent, very well read, a deep critical thinker. So the two are not mutually exclusive. I have the ability to live with, through, and in alignment with my emotions because I have access to them and am aware of them. And I can regulate my emotions, meaning I can understand what information they provide to me. I can understand how they allow me to be fully grounded and present and connected to moments, experiences, relationships, and people that matter to me. I can listen to them and also use that to pair with my logic and intellect to make fully formed and comprehensive decisions that I actually think end up being more robust than if I'm only allowing on my intellect. So all of the stuff that I sort of hear that is sort of that denigrates emotions is really toxic, harmful behavior, right? That emotional regulation is not the same as emotional suppression. And I've seen it happen in my family, like stereotypically, you know, the people say boys aren't, you know, that boys grow up hearing like boys don't cry. I literally witnessed this in my own family years ago with my younger cousin and his sons on Christmas. And they were toddlers, preschoolers, you know, between that 2 and 4-year-old range. It was late in the day. I think they were hungry. They wanted to open their gifts. They were tired. And so they started to sort of cry and have a meltdown. And I literally watched their dad like yoke them up and get in their face and say, shut that down. We don't do that. You don't cry. Be a man. Man up. You'll get to cry. And I was like, oh, this is a thing. Like, y'all really say this stuff. That's insane. I want you to hear that is insane. That's insane. They're children. Doesn't matter what gender they are. That's how you learn emotional regulation. You learn through someone saying, I know that you're tired. I know that you feel really overwhelmed right now. And your body is trying to tell that to daddy for a reason. Let me sit here. Let me hold you. Let me ground you. Let me help you regulate your emotions. I'm going to co-regulate with you. I'm going to breathe with you. I'm going to rub your back. I'm going to rock you. I'm going to take you out of the room and let you get away from some of this stimulation and calm down. I'm going to get you a snack. I'm going to take care of you. That is how we learn emotional regulation. But if your only option has ever been the full expression of unregulated emotion or the stunting of emotion, and no one tells you anything different in between, of course, 40 years later, 30 years later, 20 years later, when somebody's asking you how you feel, of course you don't have a fucking clue. I don't know. Of course, you lean into logic. You lean into the biggest resource that you have, because ultimately our responsibility, ultimately our motivation as human beings is to survive, right? So we always go to the path of least resistance. And if you have learned and socialized to over rely on your intellect of the emotional suppression, and that is what you will do over and over again. And so you build the skill in that, and you will woefully inept, unable to have emotional attunement. And if you cannot be emotionally attuned inward, you can't have emotional attunement and co-regulation in your partner. And that, my loves, is the core of intimacy. The vulnerability to share your emotional attunement with another person because you trust them to meet you in the moment. I be worried about us. Hell, I'm worried about me. I'm good and single, and I really am kind of over it. I would love to be able to feel emotionally connected and grounded and safe in a big chocolate um what was the man that did the they said that John Henry, like I like a big lumberjack. I like a can I climb you? I like a thick bay from the Black Panther. What's that man's name with the thighs for days? If somebody would please help me out and put it in the chat. I see the brother. He was in Us. Lord have mercy. That's please put it in the chat. I know y'all hear me. I want that in a physical package, but who is emotionally attuned, right? Who can hold themselves accountable, who can sit in intimate vulnerability with me. But I can't do the work for you. Your women partners can't do that work for you. And I think that's the other piece that happens a lot when we think about patriarchy, because masculinity is sort of put here and as this bastion of sort of stoicism and emotional suppression and disconnection, and then femininity is associated with emotions. That's why I see this sort of dynamic around emotional labor being done by the women in the relationships, because a lot of what happens is being in romantic relationship is seen as the only place where Black men can experience emotions. I literally saw a thread the other day that said Black men don't need a therapist, they need a good Black woman. Absolutely not. As a Black woman therapist, absolutely not. You take your ass to therapy. They are two different things. But for far too long, that's sort of been this safe haven for Black men to be able to experience, test, sit with their emotions to some extent. And we've reached the point collectively where Black women have decided that we no longer are interested in carrying all of that weight, that in fact we have whole depths of emotional universes within ourselves, that we actually are reclaiming ourselves for ourselves, that we have whole universes of interests and desires and dreams that we want to explore for ourselves and not be responsible and beholden to you to do that. So we need you to hold your weight up. And I share all of this in the context of of Men's Mental Health Month, because connected, loving, interpersonal relationships are significant to our individual and collective mental health. We are collective beings. You are born to a mother in the context of a family for a reason. We live in groups for a reason. There is a reason why social isolation is a punishment in the carceral system, because that disconnect emotionally from other people is harmful. There's a reason why a lot of people got fucked up in the pandemic, because one, a lot of people aren't even used to being alone truly with themselves, and two, being isolated is different than being alone, and being isolated for a period of time is not good for us, right? So this is a mental health issue as much as it is an interpersonal issue. Paul Benton was the other masculine folk archetype. Yes, John Henry. Yes. Oh God, the industrialization, right? That he beat the steam engine. Yeah. Indeed, right? So do your work. Okay? It's worth it. Hey, I will tell you as a person, as a therapist who has a therapist, as a therapist who works with Black folks pretty much exclusively, I tell you all the time, it's bullshit. A lot of the stuff that we're recovering and working through. I don't want it. Oh, Paul Bunyan, yes, Paul Bunyan, yes, Blue Ox, babe, the Blue Ox, yes. Like the work that I'm saying is not easy. Trust and believe. And a lot of times this healing work is raggedy as hell. The person who actively does it. But it is so much work. It is so worth it. It is so worth it. You are worth it. To do the work of acknowledging that you have been done a disservice by being required to be divested or suppress your emotions. You get to be angry about that, but you can't stay there. And to recognize that you have to reparent yourselves in a lot of ways, that you have to reorient yourself, re-socialize yourself around your emotional access, awareness, intelligence, maturity. But you could do it with a trained professional, right? You don't have to do it alone. And the reality is, for the Black women that I know, especially the Black women that I know that are genuinely invested in Black liberation, for the Black women that I know that want to be in loving relationship with Black men, baby, if you just take a baby step, we would be there to help you. We would be there to support you. We're not going to do the work for you, but we would be the biggest cheerleaders. It is so worth it. Okay. I see I have gone over time. I usually do a Dr. Nikki Knows. I didn't even have one for this week because I just really wanted to get into this. I think it was worth the time. If you have questions for me, you can drop them in the chat for sure. And the chat always is live. The chat is always open. Comments section is always open, even when the video goes live tomorrow on my channel. So it may be if you came in late or you're like, I don't quite know how I want to say it, you can always pose your question then. But I do want to make sure that we get into this week's pleasure practice, as always. Let yourself unfold. So this week's pleasure practice is for you. And I'm speaking to men that are watching. And if you are not a man, but you got a man in your life that you like, then come show them this little segment, okay? Tell them about it. The pleasure practice for this week is to observe what happens in your body when you are experiencing emotions. Period. And that could even be numbness. Okay. Numbness is a physiological experience. I want to acknowledge that, right? But if you are in interactions this week with people that you know, that are valuable to you, that are important to you, that you love, hell, your spouse, your children, your brother, your sister, whoever, as you are in relationship with them over the course of this next 2 weeks, actually, you get 2 weeks because I'm not here next week, remember? Over the course of the next 2 weeks, see if you can even be fully aware of what happens in your body. Do you feel numb? Do you feel things in your body, but you never even thought to pay attention to it? Do you feel any sense of what we would call activation? Do you feel common areas that we feel activation are sometimes in our chest, right? Around our heart area, we might feel a sense of warmth. We might feel a sense of tension in our chest. It might be more difficult for us to breathe. We might feel tension in our jaw. If we're talking about more positive experiences, we might feel a sense of like warmth or tingling, a sense of like lightness that comes across our face or across this part of our body, right? Sometimes we experience things in our gut, literally, like in our belly, a tightness of discomfort. Just see. This is the practice. Ain't nobody got to know you're doing. You don't have to tell nobody, wait, give me a moment. I'm scanning my body for my physiological reaction. But I want you to just try to see what comes up for you. Is numbness the thing that you have more than anything? Is your body screaming reactions to you and you've just been ignoring them? If you start to experience them or acknowledge those reactions in your body, can you get curious and just ask them what they're trying to tell you? It's private. Don't nobody have to know. And then come back and just let me know if you did it or not. You can just give me a 0 out of 5 stars, would not recommend. Or if you would say, actually, I kind of like the fact that I have access to more information about myself. Now I don't know what to do with it, but I kind of like that. I feel a little bit more empowered. I feel a little bit more stable, right? So that's your pleasure practice for the week. Just tune in, fellas. And for the women that are watching, get your fellas to tune in. And that could be your daddy, your uncle, your brother, your son. Talk to them about where their emotional landscape is. Like, talk to them really about, are there things that you do that make them feel like they're not allowed to have access to that? Open the door for a curious conversation. I'm glad that you found some nuggets from this evening. I think this is my longest episode yet. I keep y'all, I said I was going to do 30 minutes. I ain't had a 30-minute episode yet. So that is your pleasure practice for the week. As a reminder, I won't be here next week. I'll miss y'all, but I'll be taking care of myself by taking care of my mother's home. So please send me lots of positive light, love, and care next week. It's important work. It's work that I'm proud and honored to do, but it will be heavy work that I'm doing. And then I'll be back in the first week of July. And I don't even know what July's theme has been. I'll figure it out. I'll let you know. I will update the show notes with all those little things that I acknowledge. I might even find a link for a feeling wheel to drop in there for you all to access later. I appreciate you being here with me. If you found something that resonated for you, I'm so glad. That is my purpose in being here. And be a friend to the show. Make sure you're subscribed, comment, and share. Most importantly, okay? I've been sitting at 203 subscribers for over a month. Can a sister get to 250? Tell somebody, okay? I want to remind you that our ability to have emotional intimacy is our pathway to erotic pleasure, but it's also our pathway to our collective well-being and to our collective liberation. And that is what we all want, to live in a time, space where we all have access to the greatest parts of ourselves, to be in relationship to others who also have access to the greatest parts of themselves. And so doing the work of developing your emotional intelligence and emotional intimacy in relationships is worth the effort. All right. I'll see y'all around.